Hello, I am Lucia and welcome to my Resources and ICT exam. This exam is divided in two parts, and for this first part, I had to create a school teaching project. My group is formed by 24 students of the 5th grade of primary school, so they are around 10 and 11 years old. The school is bilingual, so the students that enter the preschool at 3 years old already start to learn the most basic English. Thanks to this, the students here have a good grasp on how the English language works, and they are also confident in their use of it. The students in my group are also very creative. Some enjoy more writing stories and drawing, while others focus more on technologies like video games. Then it was time to consult an AI so that it could generate a proposal for my project. I spoke to ChatGPT and this was our conversation. The AI's proposal was quite interesting. It talks about creating a story about a city in 2014 and having the students be the young designers and creators of it. They do various activities so that they could learn about diversity, technology, and social skills, amongst other things, which fits just right with the objectives from the curriculum. Still, the proposal seems to be quite flawed. For example, it assumes that all 24 students are already comfortable working with different digital tools like Picton, Scratch, or Canva. It also assumes that the school and the group's teacher, which is me in this case, have the technical skills and resources to facilitate these activities. It barely mentions the group differences in its members, but with a very simplified answer to the kids with various cultural backgrounds and learning abilities in the class, and without a mention of how the kids would be even divided when doing the tasks. Will there be any groups? How would they be divided? Now, for this project, I've decided to do 3 interconnected activities: a comic, a stop motion, and a game. The project is called Digital Heroes, Becoming Responsible Citizens in the Online World. For this, the kids working in 6 groups of 4 students won't just learn by hearing about online security. Instead, they'll create their own digital heroes, using technology correctly to create activities that will help other children learn about cyberbullying, scams and suspicious messages, fake news and misinformation, privacy and personal information online, healthy screen time, and respecting others' privacy and work online. In the first class, before actually starting with their task, I would first introduce the idea for this project. We would all sit down together and I would ask the class some questions. What technologies do you normally use? With what purpose? Do you have ideas of how to make the internet a safer and kinder place? We would have between 10-20 minutes to discuss their answers before I start introducing the topics of their work, and after that, I'd read them this short story. This short story talks about 3 friends that are Alex, Sofia, and Leo, and the 3 go through bad experiences online, and when they're talking, they receive a special message that tells them to become digital heroes and help other children. And finally, I would explain to the class that during the next few sessions, they would be creating their own digital heroes and that their mission would be to help other children be safe online by creating a comic, a stop motion, and a video game. Once the groups are all formed and everyone has their topic, we start with the first task of this project, the comic. Students will first think about a situation related to their topic, which in my case is cyberbullying, and then decide what message they want their story to share. They also need to think of their characters, especially their superhero, and then they will create the short comic with 10 panels maximum using storyboard. They should choose their characters, add backgrounds and speech bubbles, and show how the problem can be solved in a positive and responsible way. Finally, they will check that their comic is easy to understand and it has a good message to learn, such as that asking for help or supporting others is good. In my case, in my story about cyberbullying, I created Captain Kind, a young superhero who helps a classmate after she receives mean messages online. For the second task, the students will be creating their own stop motion with the same topics they had before. They will first discuss their idea in groups and think about how to show what could happen if the digital hero they created didn't appear to help a kid, so they would have no help with their problem. They are encouraged to do some research online to learn more about the topic and read actual cases of these situations. Once they have planned their story and chosen the characters, they will have to draw and color by hand all the characters and objects on paper and then carefully cut them out. Next, they will create the stop motion by moving the drawings little by little over some background seats while someone remains still and takes photos of all the movements with their tablet. After they are done, they will upload the pictures into an editing app such as InShot, arrange them into a video, and add dialogues or text. Finally, they will review their work and save the finished stop motion, which should last no more than a minute. For my example, I did a stop motion that focuses on healthy screen time. It tells the story of a girl who spends the whole day watching TV without anyone encouraging her to stop using technologies and do something different. As time passes, she misses opportunities to enjoy other activities, such as playing with her dog or going to the park with her grandmother, showing the importance of having healthy digital habits. For the last task, students will work in their groups to design and create their own interactive game using Scratch. The aim of this task is for the students to use coding and creativity to communicate an important message and, depending on the topic they had, students may create a quiz game, a collecting game, a maze, or an interactive story. First, the students will discuss what message they want the players to learn and talk among themselves to decide how the game will work. This could include deciding on the characters that appear, the rules, and how the players will score points or progress in the game. Then, they'll open a Scratch and create a new project. They will choose a title for their game and select suitable backgrounds and sprites that fit the theme. Students will choose or create a sprite that the player will control, and they will use Scratch blocks to program its movements and interactions. Next, they will create different elements needed for their game, like falling objects, quick questions, or obstacles. They'll also use variables to keep track of points, lives, or levels to make the game more engaging and allow players to see their progress. Then, they will decide how the game ends and will create some end screens and messages. Once the main coding is complete, students will test their game to make sure everything works correctly. If there are problems, they will identify and fix any of them, and then they will be done. In my example, I've created a personal information protector, which focuses on privacy and personal information online. In this game, players control a cardboard box using the arrow keys, and they have to catch pieces of information that should be kept private while avoiding catching information that is generally safe to share. The game includes a score counter, lives, and winning and losing the screens. Now, to properly explain the added value of the digital tools used with PICRAD framework, we must first explain what it is. The PICRAD model is a framework used to think about how technology is integrated into learning activities. It combines two perspectives: PIC, which focuses on what students are doing with the technology, and RAD, which focuses on how the technology changes the learning task itself. On the one hand, the PIC part is divided into these three levels: passive, where students only receive information; interactive, where students respond to or engage with content; and creative, where students actively produce something new using technology. On the other hand, the RAD part is divided into these three levels: replacement, where technology simply substitutes a traditional tool without changing the task; amplification, where technology improves efficiency or makes the task easier or more organized but the learning goals stays the same; and finally, transformation, where technology allows the students to do things that would not be possible without it, creating new ways of learning and understanding. First, for the storyboard.comic, the tool works mainly at the interactive amplification level of PICRAD. It doesn't change the learning goal, but it makes the process much easier and more visual. Students can quickly build the scenes, add characters, and use speech bubbles to organize their ideas clearly. This helps them focus more on their message instead of struggling with drawing, so the story becomes clearer and more structured. For the stop motion made with InShot, this fits better in the creative transformation level. Here, students are not just presenting an idea, they are actually building a moving story from scratch. By creating, cutting out, and animating their own drawings, they turn a simple message into something more real and emotional. The editing in InShot also helps them combine images into a proper video, which completely changes how the story is experienced. Lastly, for the Scratch video game, this is also part of creative transformation. Students are now designing an interactive experience where the player learns by playing. They have to think about the rules, behaviors, rewards, and consequences, which deepens their understanding of their topic. Instead of just receiving information, the player actively makes decisions, so the learning becomes much more engaging and meaningful. Next, to assess this project, I have created this rubric that has the key areas I think are more important to evaluate the kids on their learning process. The rating going from the lowest being a 1, insufficient, to the highest being a 4, excellent. I will assess their use of English, as we are a bilingual group, and their understanding of online safety and cybersecurity, since that is the main content of the project. Another important part is the quality of the final product, the comic, the stop motion, and the Scratch game. I'll also take into account teamwork, because this is a group project and students need to collaborate. And finally, I will consider creativity and reflection, meaning how original their ideas are and how well they think about their own learning and use the feedback to improve. Overall, the idea is to assess not just what they create, but also what they learn, how they use their knowledge, how they work together, and how well they communicate their ideas. For the next part, I had to assess the apps and tools I use based on their privacy, data protection, and rights policies, following the Rapid for Learning Tools evaluation. And this was the result. First, a storyboard that was placed in the middle column for sign up because students usually need an account, either their own or one created by the teacher, meaning that some information is shared with the company, although I've seen that it follows educational privacy standards. For data ownership, it was rated with the highest category because users keep ownership of their work and they can decide whether or not to share it. It was also placed in the highest category for saving and exporting, because the storyboards can be downloaded and exported in different formats. InShot was rated in the highest category for sign up because it can be used without creating an account, so very little personal information is required. Users also keep ownership of the videos they create, which places it in the highest category for privacy and ownership. However, it was placed in the middle category for saving and exporting because, although the finished videos can be exported, drafts are stored locally, and moving projects between devices is limited. Finally, Scratch was rated in the highest category in all three areas. An account is not required when using the offline version. Students retain ownership of their projects, and projects can be easily saved, downloaded, uploaded, and shared. This gives the students a high level of control over both their work and their data. A relevant dilemma in this project is the balance between innovation and accessibility. Using digital tools such as Storyboard, InShot, and Scratch makes learning way more creative and engaging. But these tools can also present challenges, as students may have never used any of these tools and getting used to them can be easier or harder depending on their level of digital competence and varying access to technology. To address these issues, the activities have been designed to be as accessible as possible for all. All students have a tablet from the school to use, as well as 2 or 3 computers to serve when needed. They have worked collaboratively in groups so that they can support one another, and there was always a teacher with them to help them and answer their question, as well as to give instructions and examples. In addition, the selected tools are all free and relatively easy to use, so they are all appropriate to primary school students their age. Lastly, each activity also combines the main digital tools with simpler tasks and non-digital elements, such as carrying out basic internet research, taking photos, or drawing characters by hand. This helps ensure that all students can participate successfully, regardless of their previous experience with technology. In addition, the selected tools are all free and relatively easy to use, so they are all appropriate to primary school students their age. Lastly, each activity also combines the main digital tools with simpler tasks and non-digital elements, such as carrying out basic internet research, taking photos, or drawing characters by hand. This helps ensure that all students can participate successfully, regardless of their previous experience with technology. In the first class, before actually starting with their task, I would first introduce the idea for this project. We would all sit down together, and I would ask the class some questions. What technologies do you normally use? With what purpose? Do you have ideas of how to make the internet a safer and kinder place? We would have between 10 and 20 minutes to discuss their answers before I start introducing the topics of their work, and after that, I'd read them this short story. In pedagogy, I have that learning occurs with the active construction of knowledge in my activities, as well as the creation, of course, of activities and practice. In a space, we have the classroom, the computer room, and the exhibition space. We use as a resource collaborative study. As resources, we use laptops and computers. We also use tablets. We use paper, different types of pencils, and we have the online forum so the parents can receive notifications. For the social interaction, the kids work in groups and they were an audience when receiving the feedback and seeing the projects of their other friends, while me as a teacher, I was the teacher as well as the mentor. I was also the person that facilitated this, while the students were the people that work in the task and the ones to generate ideas. On the knowledge task, we had things like web pages and image-based mediums. We also used games, and the kids solved problems together. The kids had to make their own creation, and they had to demonstrate that they knew their work. And they also had to both evaluate themselves and give feedback to the others. Lastly, they were able to create some simulations, and they also had to share ideas in group. And now for the second part of this exam, I'm going to be doing question 2, question 3, and question 5, so let's get to it. These 4 concepts I'll be showing are the 4 I think are most important from all that we've explored during this course. The first concept is Ditchcom Edu, and here's the definition. A good example about how it can be useful to me is in my future job as a primary school teacher. If I was given a science lesson about the ecosystem, I would think of Area 2 digital resources and decide to use videos and interactive presentation to make the topic more interesting, instead of just using the regular textbook. I could also have the students work together in groups to create a digital poster, which is included in the Area 3 teaching and learning. And I could use a Kahoot quiz to check their understanding, which is included in the Area 4 assessment. The second concept is PLE, and here's its definition. And it can be useful to me if, for example, I have to design activities for a project about prehistory. First, I will start searching for information in my notes, in YouTube, and even ChatGPT, which is part of the area of reading. Then, I would organize the information and create the assignment using tools like Google Docs and Canva, which would be part of reflecting and doing. Finally, I'd be sharing ideas and solving doubts with my classmates through WhatsApp, and also talking in person to my professors, which is part of the PLN, Personal Learning Network. The third concept I chose was AI in education, and here's the definition. And a good example about how it could be useful to me would also be for my future job as a primary school teacher. If I were teaching multiplications and noted that some of my students still have issues with the third and fourth timetables, while others were ready to do more complex multiplications, I could use AI-based learning platforms like IXL Math in Class. Each student could receive activities adapted to their level, and this would help me attend to all their different needs without leaving anyone behind. The last concept I chose was creating educational tools, but there wasn't a definition about all of it complete, so I have the definition of educational tools themselves. Just like before, the example to show that this could be useful to me would also be for my future job as a primary school teacher. If I were teaching multiplications in a class, I could create different educational tools, like Canva presentations to explain concepts, a Padlet wall with examples and practice activities, and also Kahoot quizzes to review the timetables. These tools would make the lessons more interactive and would help the students to stay engaged. Creating my own educational resources would also allow me to adapt my activities to the different levels and needs of my students, making the lessons more effective and enjoyable. Now, for question 3, I have to explain 5 critical elements of this course that I would like and should include permanently on my PLA, giving of course a proper justification. First though, what is a PLE? Well, according to Adelan Castañeda, it is a combination of tools, sources of information, connections, and activities each person uses regularly to learn. Now for my PLE, these are my 5 critical elements of this course. Starting with reading, the part about accessing information, I would keep Google Scholar, a free and easy web that I discovered 2 years ago and that I've been using since. With it, I've been able to find tons of reliable academic articles and information for my assignments, and I think it could be pretty useful in future research. Second, being in both reading and reflecting doing, I knew I had to include ChatGPT. It has been extremely useful through all the course because with it, when I was in need to search for information that on first hand didn't appear in the internet, it gave it to me. Also being able to cite the academic sources it used when properly asked. But its main use for me was creation. It gave me great and cute images, and it helped me understand difficult concepts, summarize information, and even generate original ideas when I was studying or preparing activities. Next, now in Reflecting Doing, we have both Canva and Padlet. On the one hand, Canva is an app I have grown accustomed to using, and it is easy to navigate. With it, I've been able to create presentations and educational materials in a creative and visual way, which will be very useful in my future as a primary school teacher. Padlet, on the other hand, was something new that at first seemed a bit confusing, but getting the hang of it wasn't a problem in the end. I found that it is an easy way to organize resources and collaborate with classmates, and I can also imagine using it with my future students to share activities and ideas. Finally, I would 100% keep WhatsApp as a part of my personal learning network, since I use it as a fast and easy way to communicate with not just my group for different projects, but also all my classmates. We've been able to ask questions of all kinds, share notes, resources, and even get to know each other better outside of our lives as students. In the medium and long term, I think my PLE will evolve with all of these apps and webs in it, but especially through the tools like Canva and Padlet because I hope to use them not only now as a university student, but also in my future classroom to design my own educational resources and to teach my students to design their own projects as well. For my reflection, I think I deserve around an 8 because I worked consistently both by myself and with my group throughout the whole course. Even though I had some problems and I wasn't fully active in some parts of my work, I talked with Linda and with my group and I got back on track and started working properly again. At first, I thought that being the star would be the hardest role because you had a lot of responsibility when presenting the group's work, but in the end it turned out to be quite fun, especially when you had another star to work with. The most difficult role for me was actually the analyst because it is complicated to evaluate the group's members' work and yourself while also keeping track of the whole group work and reflecting on it at the end of a week. For this project, I used ChatGPT as a helpful tool. It supported me by giving me ideas, different perspectives, and also creating images for me. But in the end, it was me who worked on this project. I was the one with the idea of the little heroes. I was the one that organized the tasks, that actually did them by hand and with my iPad. And it is something that the AI cannot replace. It can give ideas and help with the small things, like I said, like with the images. But the work done is actually done by a person. It's done by me, and an AI could never replace that.